Welcome to Rukhsana's book club. Now, I'm going to share the housekeeping rules. Please stay muted. The session will be recorded, and there will be time for questions, and we'll have a discussion afterwards. You can raise your hand during the time for discussions, and I'll unmute you one at a time, or you can type your question into the chat. That's something you can do. Okay. Now, today's story. I am going to reveal what today's story is, and today's story is about negotiation. And I was just talking to some of the children who had already arrived that negotiation is basically discussing something, talking about something till you reach an agreement. Like you start out where somebody's not happy, or maybe more, both sides are not happy, but you talk things through until you get to a point where everybody's okay with the new agreement. Okay, that's negotiation. And the story I'm going to share with you is a Canadian classic. It's called Amos's Sweater. Now, this story, it did so well. It has a bunch of stickers on the front. It won the Governor General's Award. It was, yeah, like a bunch of awards and stuff because it's such a good story. And to me, this story really is about negotiation, okay? And Amos is not the lady on the cover. And she's knitting a sweater. The pictures, okay, it's written by Janet Lunn. Now, Janet Lunn was an older lady. I met her a couple of times. Very nice lady. She had such a knack for writing good stories. And it's illustrated by Kim LaFave. Now, Amos's sweater. And the beginning of this book is perfect. Like, if you can start a book and you just basically tell the reader what this book is about in the first sentence, you got something good. Like, look at the first sentence. Amos was old, and Amos was cold, and Amos was tired of giving away all his wool. Now, think about that sentence. That sentence is basically telling you what's going on. There's Amos. He's a sheep and he's an old one. Okay. So, all his life, he's been giving away his wool for the farmer to sell it to make sweaters and stuff like that. Right. So, it's not like he's never cooperated. It's not like he's never given away his wool. But now he's old. And did you know that sometimes old people get cold? They do. So Amos was old and Amos was cold and Amos was tired of giving away all his wool. Okay, so there's a problem. There's a problem. So he doesn't want to give his wool away this time. So one summer day, when Aunt Hattie went out to the pasture with her big clipping shears, Amos balked. Now, balked, that's such a good word. Balked, B-A-L-K. It's like it rhymes with walk. Balk means you don't want to do something. So you cross your arms and you don't want to do something. That's balking, okay? So Amos balked. Bah! He cried. He butted Aunt Hattie and ran away. Amos, stop! Shouted Aunt Hattie. Stop, Amos! But Amos did not stop. I mean, look at the picture of Aunt Hattie. Isn't it so cute? Look at her glasses are askew. He butted her and she fell down. And those are the clipping shears. And all you can see is Amos's hoofs as he's running away. Now, the illustrations in this book are hilarious. They're very, very funny. Aunt Hattie ran after him. She chased him around and around the meadow. Can you imagine Aunt Hattie chasing Amos around and around the meadow? It would look so funny. She chased him up and down the hillside and across the brook, but Amos was too fast. Uncle Henry had to help catch him and hold him down. Then Aunt Hattie clipped his wool. Now, Amos is a sheep, so he can't actually discuss what he wants. He can't tell them, hey, I'm old and I'm cold and I'm tired of giving away all my wool. He can't speak because he's a sheep. So, how is this negotiation going to work? And now you know all of the characters in the story. There's Amos and there's Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry. Now, look at this picture, guys. This picture, Amos is pulling on one side, and Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry are pulling on the other. It's kind of a tug of war. That shows you what's going on in the story, okay? That's what the negotiation needs. Although one person in this situation can't speak. It's sheep. It's Amos. He can't talk. There now, Amos, Aunt Hattie said. That wasn't so bad, was it? Bah, said Amos. Aunt Hattie gave him an apple to make him feel better. But Amos did not feel better. He was old and he was cold. And now he was angry. Oh, look at him. He looks so mad. Doesn't it look mad? And you feel kind of sorry for him. Look, the artist even made him look blue because he's cold. Okay. Oh, I feel sorry for Amos. Aunt Hattie washed the wool. She combed it and she spun it. Then she knitted it into a big warm sweater for Uncle Henry. Now, so he had to give up his wool, and so Uncle Henry has this big warm sweater. This is the cover photograph. This is the cover picture. There's Aunt Hattie knitting the sweater. Now, isn't that fine, Amos? She showed him the big warm sweater. Bah! Amos snatched at the sweater with his teeth. Now think about how Amos feels about giving his wool away, and then she makes him. She makes a sweater for Uncle Henry. Okay. Every time Amos saw Uncle Henry wearing his sweater, he bit it. There were always Amos holes in it that Aunt Hattie had to mend. Now, again, look at this picture. There's Amos, and he's tugging on his sweater. It's a tug of war. Get it? All of the pictures actually usually have Amos and Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry on the other side tugging at each other. It's a tug of war. This is a conflict. One hot day, when Uncle Henry left the sweater over the fence, Amos tried to pull it down. It stuck fast, and he made such a huge hole in it, Aunt Hattie came after him with a stick. Can you imagine Aunt Hattie chasing him around with a stick saying, Why did you make a big hole in the sweater? Aunt Hattie mended the huge hole. She washed the sweater and hung it out to dry. Amos waited for her to go into the house. Then he made for a jump for it, but the line was too high. Now look at the expression on Amos's face. See, this artist is so good at capturing how angry and frustrated Amos feels. Now, I'm sure everyone here has often felt angry and frustrated just like Amos. Sometimes something happens and we get angry and frustrated. So this feeling is in Amos. One night, Uncle Henry left the sweater on the table in the back kitchen of the house. So she's setting up the scene. Okay, the sweater is on the table in the back kitchen of the house. The door was open. The moon was full. Amos could see the sweater from his stall in the barn. He butted the stall door. He shoved it. He butted it. He shoved it. He butted and shoved until the door flew open. Okay, so he's in his stall. There he is in his stall. And he sees the sweater on the table. Okay, now, what's he going to do? Amos dashed across the barnyard into the back kitchen. He yanked the sweater off the table. Furiously, he pulled it this way and that. An end of yarn caught in his hoof. He pulled and twisted to get it loose. He tugged, he twisted, he bit. He rolled around on the floor. The more he struggled, the tighter the yarn wound around him. Soon he was so tangled you couldn't tell which was yarn, which was sweater, and which was Amos. Now look at the language that she uses. Okay, dashed. He dashed across the barnyard. So the words she uses really give you an idea of what's happening. He dashed. He yanked the sweater. These are words that sound like what they mean. Furiously, he pulled it this way and that. An end of yarn caught in his hoof. He pulled and twisted. to get it loose. He tugged, he twisted, he bit. This language really gives you an idea of how frustrated, how angry he is. He wants that sweater. Bah! Amos cried. Bah! Bah! In such rage, Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry came running to see what had happened. Oh, Amos, now you've done it. Aunt Hattie sighed. Uncle Henry laughed. He began to unwind the yarn. Amos glared at them with his angry black eyes. Now, remember, I told you most of the pictures are tugging back and forth. Here, Uncle Henry is tugging at this big snarl of yarn because Amos is caught in all of that. Okay. Free at last, Amos stood up. His two front legs were deep in the arms of Uncle Henry's sweater. His head poked through the top. So somehow, while Amos was fighting and biting that sweater, he put it on. Now, watch what happens. You know, Hattie, Amos is old, said Uncle Henry. And maybe Amos is cold, said Aunt Hattie. And maybe, they said both at the same time, Amos is tired of giving away all his wool. Now look what happened. He couldn't say how he felt, but Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry figured out how Amos felt because of the way he was acting. Now that's part of empathy. So if Amos can't speak. He can't say, "Look, I want my sweater." He can't speak, but they figured it out, and that means that when you're negotiating, you have to be reasonable. Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry, they didn't realize how Amos felt until now, because like Uncle Henry says, Hattie, Amos is old. And Aunt Hattie, they're both old too. And Aunt Hattie says, well, maybe Amos is cold. And they both said, and maybe they said both at the same time, Amos is tired of giving away all his wool. Watch what happens. Now, if you go by the farm where Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry live, you will see the sheep out in the pasture. There is one standing a little apart. That is Amos. He is old, but he is not cold because he is wearing his sweater. So Aunt Hattie and Uncle Henry, their hearts were touched, and they decided to give Amos the sweater. Okay. They decided to give him back his own sweater so he doesn't have to be cold. Because remember, sometimes old people get cold. And look at all the other sheep. There's all the other sheep, but he's the only one who's wearing a sweater.